Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Development Discourse, where we ideate for Africa's development. My name is Patrick Okigbo, the founding partner at Nextier. Nextier is a multi-competency advisory firm, where we're really focused on supporting to solve Africa's complex development challenges. And one of such challenges is how not-for-profit organizations will cope with declining donor support. Whilst the USAID freeze is the one that makes the broad headlines, we've seen also that many of the other development partners are cutting back on their aid support to Africa. Therefore, not-for-profit organizations must reassess their models, their business models, and focus more on resilience, as many of these African communities depend on them for essential services. My guest today runs one of those organizations, but they've been largely unaffected by the aid freeze, and their resilience can be found in their founding development philosophy, which may hold some lessons for similar organizations. And that's why we're very glad to have Dr. Nacha Geoffrey, who's the country manager at the African Nature Investors Foundation, ANI Foundation. It was established in 2017 to promote best practice nature conservation. It encourages Africans to take the lead in conservation efforts while demonstrating that private sector investments in protected areas can drive local and national development. Nacha is a conservationist and development practitioner whose broad field and leadership experiences. He holds an MSc in primate conservation from Oxford Brookes University, awarded through the Distinguished Primate Habitat Country Scholarship. In 2013, he received the Conservation Leadership Program Award to support his work with the Wildlife Conservation Society at the Yankari Game Reserve, which will come up a lot in our conversations today.
Protected areas, national parks, and game reserves are not excluded from the Nigerian factor. They are affected from what happens in Nigeria. If this guest could remember, or this your partner could remember, when her parents went for honeymoon in Yankari, Nigerian universities, Nigerian primary schools were much better than they are today. The security situation and the economy, the exchange rate was also much better. So I think what we tend to see is just the spillover effect of what is happening all across the country. So by and large, I would say it's the Nigerian factor. It has affected every aspect of our economy, including nature. Sadly, because our politicians have put in a lot of emphasis on oil and only oil, they have not invested in nature and wildlife and the additional benefits that all of this would bring. Simple things like creating the enabling ground for players to come in, they have not provided. They have not put in the resources, they have not put in the attention. So it's not there is lack of political will, there is lack of interest. I remember many times, by the way, I lived in Yankari for 10 years. I lived inside that bush for 10 years, living with the locals, managing and doing what we did there. But the government never saw it as a priority. And increasingly, we've been promoting the government to understand that protected areas are not just important because there is wildlife or because of ecotourism. No, if you are familiar with Sambisa Forest in Borno State, which is the heartbeat of Boko Haram, it's a game reserve that was not managed properly, and it has turned out to what it is. So we must look at it as areas of strategic local and regional security, which has a lot of implications. If you look at how much money in dollar terms the Nigerian government probably claims to have spent in managing the insurgency that started from Borno State, a fraction of that could have fixed all the protected areas in Nigeria and bring a lot of additional benefits to our people and allow our economy to have grown. So, yeah, so by and large, I would say this is what is happening.
So again, besides the romantic nostalgia, besides the insecurity that Sambisa poses today, why should any of us, the 163 million Nigerians who can barely eat, why should we be concerned about nature reserves? What does it do for us at the personal level?
Let me start at the village level where I belong. The communities around Gashaka Gumti National Park, especially on the Gashaka side, there has never been national grid in those areas. There is very little presence of infrastructure from the government. So they are their own government. They grow their own food, they provide their electricity if they have to. So the national park could either be a blessing or a cost to them. So apart from the ecological benefits of carbon dioxide sequestration and all of the other benefits that you and I in the city can talk about, for people in the communities, it's livelihood. This is
Yeah,
the only way they can survive. It's
yeah.
for people in the city that you see it like holiday, like vacation. But for them, this is their lives. And the
Mm,
problem now is some of them cannot go to their farms because if a protected area is not well managed, then you have bandits, you have kidnappers, you have terrorists who stop them from going to do their activities. So
mm,
if you ask some communities that are unlucky to be in some of those areas where the protected areas are not well managed, I'm not specific about any now, they would tell you they would rather have turned those places to their farms because it wouldn't have been an ungoverned or an unmanaged wilderness area.
Please. Yeah. And
Yeah.
now realizing the importance and realizing that, we need it, first of all, from a national perspective, but also for the people. And you can talk even globally that these places can, play a significant role in the climate change issues that we're dealing with. How is your organization, ANI, approaching this rehabilitation, restoration of the national parks? And what is the different approach you bring to this conversation?
One of the things we do different at ANI is, first of all, it's African-led organization, mostly
Mhm.
Nigerians. So we look at the problem on a more local level because we are Nigerians. They say he who wears the shoes know where it pinches most.
Mhm.
But one thing we people always forget is we are protecting or managing protected areas for wildlife. We are doing it for the people. How can we make this very beneficial for the people? So our perspective is how do we manage this place together with its neighbors? How can we make the community surrounding these protected areas to see these places as a blessing rather than a curse? But also in the long term, how can we make the government see economic sense of even having protected areas in the first place? It has to be able to generate revenue. It has to make economic sense to the government before it can put in more money. But it's the question of is it the egg before the hen or the hen before the egg? Has the government put in the right policies, the right investments for these things to turn around? No, but the government has a lot of things to do at its hands. What we've seen is mostly foreign organizations coming to dictate or to tell us how they think we should do what should be done. And interestingly, a lot of even the Nigerian philanthropy would rather give their money to the international organizations to manage than to Nigerian organizations, partly because there isn't a lot of expertise locally, but
Mhm.
also there is the problem of trust with Nigerians, many of them having had a lot of the Nigerian experience from some other people. But also largely, I think Nigeria has not diversified how it thinks, so it has not paid a lot of attention. So at ANI, we see how do we work with government and communities to manage these places? How can we make protected areas an engine for development for the local areas, but also for the local economy, for the national economy. And one
Mhm.
of the big things to think about is this requires a lot of money because the parks have been partly neglected for so long. So how do we revamp them and bring them back to life in such a way that investors would be willing to come and invest in ecotourism and other aspects of the economy?
Mhm.
If you look at, there are some Nigerian banks that currently fund protected area activities in Kenya, for example, that I know very well. They are Nigerian banks, but they don't fund any conservation activities in Nigeria because either they haven't been approached by the right persons or they don't think there is enough happening in Nigeria for all of this to happen. So what we did is, how do we convince Nigerian donors, Nigerian philanthropy to be able to invest? We cannot always depend on international community giving us money. Meanwhile, you see Nigerians living really good life as one of the best in the world, driving the best cars, having so many private jets. How do we convince donors that we would only expect international money to fund our activities? But also, the one of the questions our founders ask themselves is, are we going to continue to depend on philanthropy in perpetuity? What if, even it were all Nigerian donors, are they not going to get tired? How do we have a model that, on a minimum, the activities can be able to, the parks can cover their running costs and be able to run without, with little or no philanthropy. So from inception, our philosophy is, yes, we must start with philanthropy, and we may continue to need some philanthropy for big projects, but we also need to let donors know that we don't want to depend on you for 30 years or for 20 years. We want to develop this park and get them to the standard that they can be very viable for development, so that we'll be able to generate our own funding, at least to manage our activities.
Mm, mm.
Maybe for some of the listeners who are not aware, we manage Gashaka Gumti National Park, which is about twice the size of Lagos State. We've signed a 30-year co-management agreement with the Nigerian federal government through the National Park Service. We started in 2017, and in 2022, we again signed for Okomu National Park, which is in Edo State, doing the same model. And largely what we do is work with the communities to try to support their livelihood. But we don't just support them as people giving freebies or just as a humanitarian NGO. We make them understand that if we build your schools, if you build boreholes, we are not doing it just because we are good people or because you are poor, but we need return on our investment. It's we don't need money back, but we need you to work with us to manage this park, so that when this park start bringing money, you would want to protect it, because your children went to school because you had a park. Your women can now do business because we have empowered them. Your youth now have different businesses that they can do because they are living alongside nature and alongside national park. So this is some of our approach. So we have invested a lot of our time and fundraising on the Nigerian philanthropy, and probably over 60% of our funding comes from Nigerian philanthropy. Only a fraction comes from the international community, which is why I think we were quite protected when the freeze in the US government funding happened.
Fantastic. And so speak to me or to our listeners about what's the investment model here. So even in your name, African Nature Investors, I can understand what goes to the local communities. You know, their life is improved, you know, access to schools, electricity, etc. What's in it for you? And I like the fact that you mentioned that you're not doing this because you're good people. You know, obviously you're good to even look at
But
it.
we are not bad people.
But you're not bad people. Yeah. So what's the investment side? What's in it for you?
Yes. So the name was carefully chosen. Investors, meaning we are not just doing this as philanthropy.
Yes.
We want the our founders are all from the business world. So we are looking at this from an investment angle, not necessarily to get money in return, but for carbon dioxide sequestration to happen better, for communities living alongside national parks to have better life, for the Nigerian federal government, state government, and local government in the areas that we operate start generating a lot of money from ecotourism as a result of our investment. Because a lot of time in Nigeria, people see national parks, game reserve, and protected areas as just places to dump money, and they never get money out. You may not get that money out directly as the one that has put in that money, but currently over 2,000 women have livelihood supported, upgraded around Gashaka Gumti as a result of our intervention. To us, that is a return we are getting on the investments that we are putting in the park. But ultimately, the entire local government area now is safer as a result of our collaboration with the government to protect the park and manage it together with the community. So the name was carefully chosen because we don't want communities to think that we are just doing this because they are poor, or because there's a lot of money to throw around, but also for our donors who put in money in what we are seeing, to see that they are not just doing this just to have wildlife roam in the park, but they are investing in the lives of these people to make the economy grow, to make the economy function much differently than it's happening.
One of the core pillars or drivers of your model is that you raise support locally.
Yes.
What does local mean for you? So is it locally from just Nigerians, wherever they may be, or is it locally from the local communities surrounding the park or from the state? How do you define local, and do you pay more attention to one particular group over the other?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. And to answer that question, I would say all. For example, there are a lot of local stakeholders around Gashaka-Gumti National Park that are highly respected individuals that may not have the net worth financially, but have the credibility worth that the communities listen to. So we
Mm,
partner with them. They may not be bringing in money in the project, but they have a voice that they speak to the people to say, don't lock down these trees, don't do this. They have a lot of more they have a lot of morality that they bring on the table, and they are being listened to by the
mm,
people. So locally on that level, we have a lot of those partners that we work with, and we see them also as investors. They have invested their morality all their lives, and they are now
their
giving it
social
back.
capital. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
Then we spend a lot of time on Nigerian philanthropy, Nigerians living in Nigeria or businesses in Nigeria. That is where currently a lot of our funding comes from. To be specific, we haven't explored much on Nigerians in diaspora. So mostly is Nigerians or businesses in Nigeria that we have paid a lot of attention to. Nigerian businesses or Nigerian philanthropy that we have paid a lot of attention to do our fundraising.
mm,
Luckily, as a result of some of this funding that we've catalyzed, a lot of international community is now looking at our model as they think this is the way to go, and we are now getting some attention that we have not expected to get naturally when we started.
mm. Interesting. And again, if we look at the local donors or local philanthropy, it's touted as a more sustainable revenue stream. However, we know that Africans often are constrained by economic inequality or historical distrust of governments and even people and corporations, etc. How have you built trust, or what are some of your trust building strategies in these communities or with your community engagement that have proven successful and that other NGOs could also look at in the work they do?
One of the things we've done is we run an uninclusive project. So we have the local communities on our board. We have people from the state. We have people from the federal, in addition to the other board members we have all across Africa. Our founders carefully took time to select who is going to join the management team.
Mm,
People who already come with a lot of credibility, a lot of track record. So we have invested a lot in doing that. But also we spend a lot of time building the project. Building the project means working with our stakeholders, which are the communities, but also just doing the actual job. We don't market ourselves a lot. We try to meet donors to say this is what we've achieved, this is our dream, this is our vision, and we invite you. We don't tell donors that please can you help us to do ABC. No, we tell them we are on a journey, and it's a 30-year journey, and it's renewable, and this is where we are. And we think there's a lot in for you if you join us, if you collaborate with us to do this journey. So it's for us, you are not giving us money as Nacha or as my executive director Tunde. No, you are giving a money to the project to make the people around this community have better lives so that they can protect this park, so that as Nigerians, we all have something to be proud of and something to fall back to. So it's the credibility, the track record, but also the work we do on the ground and the all-inclusive way we run. But also we are very strict about funding. We manage our resources very carefully, and we are very accountable to our donors. We make sure no, as as much as we can, no kobos slips away without being accounted for. So our donors are able to see everything we do in black and white. And we don't have overheads that many other organizations have. Having worked for other organizations in the past, we don't have overheads. When you give any foundation $1 million go into the field directly on the project. So our donors are very happy to see where their money is going into.
And I want to spend a bit of time on that. But let me break down the question in two. So, number one, can you just help us in a few seconds articulate when you see programs in a national reserve? What are some of these programs that you do, that you spend money on, and why do you do them and why are they important? I know we've touched on them, but I just want to wrap them up and make sure we articulate them well for our listeners to understand. And then number two, I want to go to this accountability issue because it's really at the core of what some of the NGOs, kind of suffer from, trying to prove that you're using the monies as you should. And then finally, how we measure impact. So there are lots of questions there, but let's start with just articulate for us what a day in your life is for the organization and what you do and why you choose to do those things and why they're important.
Okay, so first of all, when we signed the co-management agreement with the government, the first things we do was not just to start managing the park. We did a need assessment working with experts from across Africa. We did the socio-economic needs assessment of the communities around the park to understand what are your challenges, what are your aspirations, what do you want, what don't you want, how can we work together to protect this place. So we got information from them through third-party consultants without interference. So, so the solutions to some of their livelihood and economic challenges all comes from them. So this is them providing solutions to their problems. Then we did a proper review of the security situation of the park. We also got experts to do a holistic need assessment. So first of all, we understood the problem firsthand. So we had a lot of science-backed data to go to donors to say, we have signed this, we have done this socio-economic assessment, we've done the security need assessment, this is what we need, these are the timelines, how do we work through that? So through that, we were able to get a lot of information, but also we work very closely with the traditional leadership in those areas. We work closely with the local government authorities. And like in Taraba State, we even signed an MOU with the state government because everybody we are supporting in the state is a citizen of the state. So we ensure that all the relevant stakeholders are on deck in regards to what we are doing. And we ensure that our development goals aligns to the bigger goals of the LGA and also of the state. Of course, all the funds that we get, we spend directly because we are accountable to our donors. But the state is carried in the picture. For example, the communities that we have solar electrified, the state government doesn't need to electrify that community. They can go to communities in other places. So this is one of the things we've done. And we ensure that a lot of the funds we get go directly to support the communities. We are working with about 2,000 women, supporting them in different aspects of their livelihood. We are working with the youths. We are also supporting with agriculture. We are providing scholarships. We are upgrading schools. So that is on that aspect. And then with the National Park Service, we have recruited rangers from the communities. These are rangers of the National Park Service, but we provide technical and financial support. For instance, we have purchased a helicopter that is used to support aerial patrol in those areas, and we help to provide lots of the funding that they need to work. But also we come in with a lot of international best practice. You send rangers on patrol, which areas do they go to? How do you know they go to those areas? Which is why we introduce the use of SMART. SMART stands for Special Monitoring and Reporting Tool. When you send a ranger to point A, he can't go to point B and tell you he was in point A. No, because we have tracking systems. We see them 24/7 from our ops room in real time. So we have involved the use of technology a lot in how we do that. Also, we have a lot of guys we call the community liaison team. We have a whole department that deals with the community liaison, and we ensure that, like the Fulanis in the communities, we have Fulani members on our team that liaise with them on a one-to-one basis. So we ensure that even our recruitment captures the diversity and the heterogeneity of these communities. And they are well represented on our program, and we are able to capture their needs and aspirations very well. On the Ranger program, we ensure that we work closely with the local government and all security personnel to support each other and work together and ensure that the national park does not become a breeding ground for criminals. So, on a daily basis, our program changes. Some days we may be launching a school with built with the communities. Some days we may be struggling to fight poaching. Some days, but everything happened at a time. Ani employs about 200 people, so we are not a very small team. So there is a lot of people on the team doing different things every day, every hour, every minute.
Let me push one question. So we do quite a bit of work in the Niger Delta, and
Yeah.
some of the challenges we have there is you're trying to explain to people to give programs a chance because it could be useful to them,
Yeah.
but they see opportunities in the immediate, either in bunkering or whatever it may be. I suspect that a similar situation obtains in the parks that you manage because before you got there, the livelihood of the communities around those parks was either to poach the animals for consumption or sale, to cut down the trees for charcoal or whatever it may be. So what you're saying to them is to give up this direct, immediate now means of livelihood for something that could come later. What has been your experience in managing this kind of deferred compensation, deferred benefits with the communities? What have you done successfully to convince them to hold off for what you're doing to take root versus to get their immediate gratification?
I think it's a very complex question. I I always see these communities as very good people, some of whom have had very bad experience from some other organizations. Many times when you see them resisting, many other organizations, I have spent some time in the Niger Delta as well. I've spent some time in Cross River. And a lot of times, what is you have there are other NGOs that just come and make empty promises and they walk away. And these guys are tired of getting some of these promises. And what I always tell people is you cannot tell a hunter whose wife is sick and needs 10,000 naira to take her to the hospital not to kill an antelope because you are protecting the antelope for the future. He needs his wife to be well now. He needs his
Mm,
wife to be well now. But luckily for us, what we do both the carrot and stick approach. The law mandates the National Park Service to arrest anyone that comes poaching. So while we are empowering the National Park Service to be able to do their work effectively and ensure that all offenders are properly prosecuted according to the law, on the other side, we are supporting the communities to say, the law is tough and nobody is going to, and nobody would take you out from the course if you go in there. So we will help you to do this to ensure that you don't do that.
mm,
But in some instances, and I'm not being specific now, there were lots of complacency in other areas I've worked in the past. These communities were used to conniving with officers or people to get away with what's going on now. So when you just come overnight as an NGO or as a private organization and try to preach to do the right things when they have been conniving with people to do the wrong things, it takes a lot of time. I think we need to do what we say,
mm,
but we need to show them there are short-term gains, there are medium-term gains, and there are long-term gains. You can't tell a hunter who has nothing else to do to stop hunting and wait for 15 years until the project starts before he starts eating. So I think projects should come with a three-phased approach where there are immediate benefits, there are medium-term benefits, and then there is the long-term benefits. I
mm.
think this is I think this has a lot of potential to be accepted by these communities.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about overheads and accountability. Earlier in my life, I interned with an organization where they had a standing rule. They spent 91 cents on every dollar, directly on projects, and if you were budgeting or spending monies or whatever, once you started coming up to that 9 cent mark, all the red lights go off. What kind of structures have you put in place at Annie to ensure that you know, minimize your overheads, that you spend most of the money you get on projects, and that, the people derive the most benefits from the donor funds? versus what we find in many organizations where most of that money goes to, paying for SUVs that drive around the whole country and not a lot gets to the people.
So typically to start with giving you an example is I live in Abuja, but Annie has no physical office in Abuja because we think it's a lot of luxury. There is more need for those funds to build infrastructure either in Gashaka Gumti National Park or in Okumu National Park. So we have no office in Abuja. So if I'm in Abuja, I work from home because not because we couldn't afford an office, but we feel in the short term there is more need for that money to go directly into the project. Secondly, we have over 20 Land Cruisers in both projects, brand new that we've bought for protection and for our activities. We don't have a new vehicle in Abuja at all. We use taxis in Abuja because we feel why buy a vehicle here when there's very little to do with the vehicle. Until recently, we got a fairly used vehicle that helps because the taxis we were relying on started disappointing us and getting us late for meetings. And sometimes they have people from oil companies who pay them higher and they will just disappoint us on the last minute. Thirdly, everybody that is paid salary in Ani gives 100% of his time working on the organization and goes to the field actively. I am in all the projects every month. Apart from fundraising and the other things I will do away from the field, I have to go to both projects every month to ensure that I also put in a lot hands-on in what we are doing. So we have very few management staff. Everybody else is on the field, but also everybody else go to the field to participate in running the project. So we ensure that our overheads are really, really low. We have zero office running costs for Abuja because why have an office here when we are managing national parks? In the medium term, we hope we are going to have an office here. But naturally, I think being a Nigerian or being a Nigerian organization comes with a lot of challenges, but also opportunity. A lot of donors will say, oh, these guys are Nigerians. No, 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 no. There's a donor that has funded us recently that we've been talking to for the last 4 years because the first time they heard about us, they felt this is scam, this is 419. So they invested a lot of time, a lot of consultants to to do all the digging they can do about us as individuals, but also about the organizations and the project that we say we are doing. And after they had done everything and did not find anything bad, we had a call with them and they said, we are quite disappointed that we couldn't find anything negative about you guys. So the next step is we want to go to the field and see what's happening. And when they went to the field, they said, you guys have exceeded our expectation and you are getting this funding. So a lot of it is we have things on ground to show our donors or any stakeholder to see what is happening. But also you can just travel to go to the park and talk to the chief or talk to the communities and ask them what is happening. They will tell you what is happening there. So I think for us, there's a lot of transparency and inclusivity in the project that really helps us to stay
Yeah.
afloat.
So here's another question on, what NGOs can do in the face of the drying up of aid in Africa. So if you look at Africa, I think if you summed up all the donor aid that came into Africa in 2023, it was right about $75 billion. But remittances, from Africans living in diaspora was at about 95 billion. So my question is, have you made any concerted efforts or have you thought deeply about how to tap into these remittances as a source of investment or funding or grants, to support the work you're doing? Have you given thought to it, and where have you guys ended on that discussion?
We have not given we have given a thought into that, but we have not explored. I believe that is one of the gaps that we need to fill. But I think you guys also the media and the people in the public space, you have a lot of responsibility. You need to talk to the Dangotes to ask them how much are you spending on the Nigerian philanthropy. You need to talk to the all of the big guys. How much are you putting? I think you need to have some of this type of interview you are having with me to tell them 80% of the funding or 90% is coming from the international community. What are you guys doing about the Nigerian foundations? What are you putting into it? I feel there is a lot of opportunity. Some of them probably don't even know about some of these projects, or the right persons haven't pitched into them. But I think if you guys guilt trip them as media, I think there is a lot of opportunity there for those to be opened.
So I hear you. I think you chose the wrong example because I think Dangote Foundation does quite a bit in
Yes,
the.
but you said a bit compared to its size. Compared to its size, when you say a bit, I find it, yeah. But that was just an example. I don't mean to say he's bad. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But the other
yeah.
question, if we throw it back, it's in your discussions with these corporates, what has been their holdbacks? So you spoke a bit about, the donor organization that took 4 years to do the research and then decided to support. What are you hearing from the corporations when you approach them to support? And how have you tried to navigate some of those challenges? Because I think that many NGOs could benefit from, such insights.
For us as Annie, it's not just about getting the funding. We also do our due diligence. There are some corporate bodies that we would never take money from because they have track record that don't align with our philosophy and our principle as an organization. So also as an organization, we don't just go to look for money because you have monies to give. We have to look at what do you stand for, what is your track record, how does that aligns with what we are doing. We sometimes it takes a lot of time to convince them, partly because naturally a lot of the organizations here and some of the foundations, they don't have systems of naturally just willing to talk or willing to accept. So a lot of it is you need to meet the founder himself, you need to meet this one himself, or you need this politician to connect you. They don't have a system like in the US where naturally funding goes into a foundation and things happen and things flow. So we don't have a particular strategy. It depends on who we are talking to, but we have a very rich team in terms of connection and intellectuality. So we are able to, this person knows this one, this person knows this one, and we, on who we are talking to, we to present the project. For example, if we know a donor that is interested in education, we are doing a lot about education. So we don't try to present wildlife and nature to you. No, we provide an opportunity to support education by supporting a project that is doing a lot of wildlife conservation activities. So we do a lot of homework to understand what are the peculiarities of each donor and what is the competitive advantage we have and how do we pitch our story. So it's on a case by case basis. But because we've made this our job, but also I think what makes it really good is all of us that are involved in fundraising in Ani are actively involved in the project on the ground. So when we go out to do the fundraising and tell the story, we talk about it from the heart because we are doing it, we are on the ground. From my experience working with some of the international organizations, a guy in Brussels or somewhere is talking about a project in Nigeria, has never visited the project. So the connection is not as much as the guy who is on ground who is managing the project. So I think our story comes with a lot of originality and ownership, which a lot of the donors like to hear. So it's really nice that everybody on the project is involved in the project. You shouldn't sit down in your glass house and just preach the project without really being involved in it. Donors like to say that everybody that is talking about the project is actually actively involved in making things happen.
No, this is great. And just to invite our participants that you can use the Q&A tab to pose your questions. And I have an interesting question from Idanjuma Abdurrahman. And he says, thanks for the conversations. But one question that begs to be answered is, in the absence of donor funding, can interventions be sustained where governance and policies are unfavorable for both for and not-for-profit organizations in the country? So really, without donor funding, are we saying that, think we're dead? Or how can these interventions be sustained in a place where governance and policies may not really be favorable to what not-for-profit organizations might be trying to do, or even for-profit organizations might be trying to do?
I mean, without the enabling environment, it's difficult. It doesn't mean it's possible. It's impossible. It's in this same Nigeria that we are saying businesses are growing and things are happening. So we must always stay positive. But I think one thing, especially for the not-for-profit or the NGOs should think about is Being not for profit doesn't mean you shouldn't generate revenue. Being not for profit doesn't mean you have to keep your cost very high. I think it's quite important even before you are set up or while you are setting up. You should ask yourself these tough questions before you set up because these are the challenges you are going to face. But also always think of it as a business that may not bring money in return, but that should be viable, that should be sustainable, and be able to survive in very harsh Nigerian economy or place to do things. When I met my friends in Namibia, they say because imagine the size of Namibia and how many people are in Namibia. So running a project in a place like Namibia is so easy because in a 100-kilometer square location, probably no human being goes there sometimes for 3 weeks. So the pressure they get is quite different from what is happening in Nigeria. But should we sit down because the environment is not very favorable and we will wait until it is favorable? I don't think so. I think we should ask these tough questions while we are being set and know how we are going to provide answers to these questions in the model that is being used to set the organizations up.
Let me shift a little bit and focus a bit on technology because I know that's one thing you implemented when you worked in the Yankari Game Reserve. The smart technology, we understand it. It helps with patrols, etc. What other technologies are you adopting in managing these parks today? And here I'm thinking AI tends to pop into all the conversations these days. Are you guys beginning to think about how to leverage AI for either doing your work, protecting the parks, running your programs? How are you incorporating technology in the work you do?
So technology is actually key in what we are doing. And yes, we are using AI. We do vegetation analysis, for example. Gashaka is about 7,000 square kilometers. You cannot put your foot on every place at every point in time to understand what is happening at a landscape level. You cannot understand the ecology at every point in time. So we do a lot of work with AI to understand the ecology and what is happening. We have started doing some work to understand livestock incursions, how cows are coming into the park. We have trained some AI models that is helping us get a lot of those data. But on the human side, it's difficult to work in such a remote terrain where there is no access to mobile network. So we have VHF radios that are being tracked in real time from the control room. All our assets, our helicopter, our vehicles, we monitor them in real time wheresoever we are. But also even the community liaison team, the guys that go into the communities, they have devices that track them in real time to be able to provide every information. They collect data as they go, and all of this data is fed back into a central system that enable us to look at which areas of the park are more challenging, where do we need to put in more resources, where do we need to put in less resources. So it helps us to make the best decisions on how to allocate very limited resources. So yes, technology is key. Without technology, we wouldn't be where we are at all. And we are continuing to explore the use of drones, the use of AI, and the use of any technology that we can find our hands on and our budget can accommodate.
Mm, mm. It's interesting that at the beginning you mentioned Sambisa Forest, which is another nature reserve that we let go of, and it's become the home for Boko Haram and Saru and many of the terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
In the parks you manage today, one of the other problems we have today in Nigeria is the farmer header crisis, right? Where um, grazing cattle get into people's farmlands and eat them up. In the parks you manage, do you have that challenge of cattle coming through? Do you have the conflict in the communities? And if yes, how have those things been resolved or at least managed?
I think sometimes the problems are more escalated in the media. The problem of livestock incursions is the biggest problem we have in the national park. But we don't see the problem of farmer herder crisis like a big challenge in all the areas we operate. It's a problem, but it's not at the magnitude that is being expressed in the media. I think the challenge that is not being discussed is a lot of the livestock grazers are herding cattle that belong to rich people in the city. I don't know who they are. So the guts they have to go around to do what they are doing It's because somebody is funding them. But the fundamental issue we see is lack of proper land use plan. Most of the states where we work don't have proper land use planning in place. So everybody is in charge, nobody is in charge. But also because a lot of the the traditional leadership system is not as strong as it were in the past, and there is lack of synergy between the local tradition and the local security and how they work together. So that is what I see like one of the big problems. I don't see the farmer herder clash as a big problem in the landscape. I see livestock incursions in the park as a big problem because most of these livestock grazers do not own any land. They just graze on people's land and they pass through. And the government has not yet had the guts to develop robust land use plan that allows people to stay on their land or to define who uses which land at every point in time. So yes, it's a problem, but I feel sometimes the problem is overgeneralized rather than looking at the specifics because we are trying to be politically correct.
And if we choose not to be politically correct, which I think we should always,
Yeah.
you've tried to draw a distinction between, just grazing livestock through and the conflict between these grazers and the farmers. So my takeaway is that because it's a natural reserve, you don't have a lot of farms in there, but
Yeah.
you still
Yeah.
have these guys come through with their cattle and probably eat up vegetation that you're trying to regenerate. How have you negotiated that with these cattle herders? And are there any lessons there for a government that's really struggling to find answers to these big problems?
I think we are beginning to understand and manage the problem much better than when we started. One
Mhm.
of the things we've realized is the grazers don't just come into a community and just set their cows. No, they try to find points of entry, which is some of the local community leaders. They pay them money or they give them cows or they give them goats and secretly have arrangements that allow them to move around. So, having our networks and working together with the local leadership, we have understood some of the root causes of the problem and are currently working with some of the critical stakeholders to see some of this happen. A lot of the problems are actually funded by people locally as well because a chief has collected 3 cows and he can't tell these people to go back. So he allows them to go around and they go around and misbehave because they have paid someone to allow them to do what they are doing. So in the areas that we work, we found this to be the major problem. But even some of the community members, they need to earn your trust before they actually discuss these problems with you. But we are lucky that we are now winning. They are now talking to us. And we are going back to these leaders to say we cannot continue like this. How do we support you to do more agriculture or do something better? So that you don't invite people that are coming to destroy the economy of your people. And then at the end of the day, we just tag either the pastoralists as bad people or the farmers as bad people. But there is a middleman that is always collecting money and aiding and abating all of this to happen. But we usually don't talk about them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have another interesting question from Bola Oyeledun. And the question is, thank you so much for the excellent discourse. I totally agree with Mr. Nacha on asking from high network companies and individuals to give, right? We just do not have individuals and corporations that give. Local giving, especially as individuals, need to be incentivized, especially through tax breaks, etc. This becomes more imperative as we move into the 2026 new tax law regime. Local fundraising can be really frustrating. How do we really mobilize and get Nigerians, both individually and corporations, to truly learn to give to causes? So the question here is, how do we incentivize, especially with tax breaks? Have you been part of any conversations with the tax man, especially as they think through the new tax law, on how local giving can be incentivized, as we find in many other countries where you can get a rebate on giving? Have you been involved in that, and what are you hearing?
We have not involved in that. Very interesting. When I started park management in Nigeria years ago, I felt there is something we're not doing right. So I decided to go to the US, to Colorado State University specifically, to study the US park management system. I thought there was a magic that they were doing as national park or as reserves, which is why they are winning. But then I realized they have these tax breaks and all of these policies in place that enables organizations, companies, foundations to choose if they want to put if some of their money should go into those places and they get tax breaks. I think it's a very good idea. I strongly support it. I was speaking to a partner yesterday and I told them when I went to secondary school in Nigeria, the definition of tax that I was taught was that tax is an involuntary levy imposed by the government on its citizens, irrespective of the services offered in return. And and that sticks to me from my JS1 up till date. When you talk about tax, I say, yeah, it's an involuntary levy. I feel seeing that this government seems to be serious about rejigging the tax system. I think this is an important conversation that we should have because I I think a lot of companies would want to explore these options and and see that they can influence how some of the money they could have paid as tax could be used directly in the areas that they have interest in. I think it's a very good discussion to have. Yeah, but we need to have the right people to approach and be able to meet these guys.
Yeah, and so here's a question I think will be top of mind for many people who run businesses in Nigeria today, and it's really about leadership capacity, training, and retaining good people. So, leadership capacity is really central to institutional resilience, not just for not-for-profits, who we're talking about today, but for profits as well. But talent retention is challenging, due to the very competitive private sector wages that obtains out there versus what the not-for-profits can pay. So how have your organization managed this challenge? I don't know if you guys pay as competitively as the for-profit organizations. I'll be surprised. But so how do you manage to retain your people? Because it's a core challenge that many not-for-profits have to deal with.
One of the principles of our founding fathers is if the organization is a charity, the individuals that we hire to work for us are not charities. They have bills to pay. And there is no market for passion. There is only market for you to pay money and get goods and services. So we don't pay like oil company will pay, but we ensure that our employees are paid competitive living wage that allows them to live decent life. Can we do better? Yes, if there were more resources, we wish to continue to do better to ensure that we have a very good retention strategy so that we continue to build. Because our dream is for us to have all of our management team to come from those local areas so that as we age out, they take over managing their parks. So yes, for us, which is why we try to keep our overhead very low because we want to ensure that people are paid living wage because the work is very tough. You work all around the clock. You don't have time for side hustle as many Nigerians would put it because they would have time to do that. I don't have time for side hustle because I'm always working. So we ensure that at least everybody on the team is paid a living wage as resources permit.
Interesting. Now, one other question that's always not bothered me, but I've been intrigued by is we look at a Sambisa and the insecurity that, has become synonymous with it. How come we don't have those same bandits, terrorists, etc., in the packs you manage? Especially because these bandits, they make a lot of money. If they find a safe home within your park, to keep the kidnapped victims, etc., they could be able to outspend you in paying your staff. So how hasn't that happened in your parks? What do you think is the secret to that?
Now, just to let you know, there were lots of them in our parks before our intervention. Our strategy of running an all-inclusive system, the communities are involved. All the rangers that protect this park are from the communities. But also very importantly, our staff, our rangers are very well trained, very well incentivized, and we have a lot of monitoring mechanisms in place that would deflect them from potential corruption. For example, every arrest a ranger team makes, they get arrest bonus just for making an arrest. And just for going out on patrol, our rangers are able to double their salary at the end of the month just on patrol allowances. They get very good field rations. So there is a lot of incentive that they see that it's not worth leaving what they are doing to go and join banditry. But also having a lot of technology, having the helicopter, having the local government authority on your side, but also they seeing the benefits that they are getting. We have currently upgraded 3 schools. We are currently giving 50 scholarships. So I think the benefit that the larger community gets from our project is bigger than what banditry would have given 20 or 30 boys in the area. But also we are working very closely with all the security agencies in the area. So it's not, we don't work in isolation. We try to work as a magnet to attract all relevant stakeholders to stay glued together to be able to face the challenges. So this is why we are getting the results that we are getting, because we run an uninclusive system, but also our staff are well incentivized and we have zero tolerance for corruption. When we find a ranger collects bribe, the ranger is properly investigated and dealt with according to the law. Most times losing your job and probably getting further prosecutions.
Fantastic. There's
Yeah.
a question from Smart Atta, and the question is just want to confirm from the investment perspective discussed by Nacha, how do we reconcile this investment perspective with the humanitarian principles that guide most of the NGOs' operations? Yeah, so I guess the question here is NGOs focus more on the humanitarian. You're speaking about investments. How do we reconcile that? I think you've explained it, but maybe you can
Yes.
build on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are working according to our principle. We as ANI believe some of these NGOs have been set up not to be sustainable, which is why there is a lot of panic when the season the US government funding happened. You cannot just continue to give a man fish without teaching him how to fish. We don't think NGOs should be dashing out money to people without expecting anything in return. You should train these people to be productive, empower them to be able to make things by themselves and be able to earn revenue. Yes, we support with education because when we did the socio-economic assessment, we realized there was a gap in the education. And we know the more educated these people are, the more they will understand the use of AI, the use of technology, and why they need to have the national park. So for us, the investment angle is we are investing in the people to be productive. We are not putting money in them just to have free lunch and then tomorrow they need another free lunch. No, we are training them so that they are also going to be able to generate revenue on their own. There are about 2,000 women that we have empowered and supported through the savings and loan groups and have trained them on different business initiatives of their choice. They are now recruiting men. They have bought agri processing machines. They are doing value addition in the agri chain. They are doing shea butter processing. They are now employing men. So for us, that is the investment angle. We see the money we spent on these women as investment because we can now see the returns on our investment. So we like to look at it from that angle because we are not the type of organization that just dash out free things to the communities. No. How can we work with you to help you to be productive so that we can make this community an engine for development for the larger area? So that is how we look at it.
Fantastic. Can we, talk a bit more about resilience in these communities where you work? And I know you've touched on them, even the last example you gave about women, empowering them, it's all about building up resilience. But we also know that because you work in these high risk, one may say, environments, that could be prone to violence, could be prone to terrorism, etc. What are other ways that you've tried to build resilience within the communities, empower the people, enable them to push back on some of these pressures that might come from economic pressures, political pressures, etc.? And why I keep harping on this question is that it's at the core of many of the challenges that we're contending with in Nigeria. And there are organizations, NGOs, that are set up to address this, and there could be lessons to learn from what you're doing in some of these national parks that that are really at risk, but you found a way to work with the people to build up resilience.
I I think one thing we sometimes forget is these communities are actually more peaceful than living in the cities. They are not troublesome people. They don't like problem because their daily their daily bread depends on the soil and the community around them. So they like peace more than the people in the cities because they have no backup plan. They have no passports to Seychelles or to some other countries where they can run to family. So they have no second home. They only have one home. So from our experience, one of the things I see is many NGOs, there's a lot of disconnect between their leadership and the reality that is happening on the ground. Having worked very closely with the communities on ground, I we see things quite different. These communities, all the rangers that work in the national park are young men from the communities. Probably those would have been some of the guys that would have been bandits, but then they are now gainfully employed more than many people that live in the cities. So they are not even available to be tempted with those things. The women that would have just sat at home and maybe be liability to their husbands are now helping to pay school fees. Their children can now go to school because these things are happening. So a lot of the challenges some organizations see, we rather see them as opportunities and blessings. We don't see the vulnerability that is being talked about. For example, we are now working with them to see how we support them with agroforestry, improve seedlings, and how we can make the best out of their their situations. We are supporting the pastoralists with free cattle vaccination. We are now talking about starting ranches. We are working closely with the Federal Ministry of Livestock that was just set up recently. We've met the minister. We 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 try to be all inclusive. We don't just like the farmers or we only like the pastoralists. We try to carry everyone along. We like to hear your story from you. Tell us what is your problem. How can we work together according to the law? You should know that we must coexist, but we have to coexist in harmony. We cannot live worlds apart. And we also have the stick approach. While we are supporting you and your livelihood, we remind you that also have the government who we are supporting and empowering to do their work. So if it's either you do the right thing and get supported, or if you work against the law, then you would have to face what you need to face. So for us, we don't. Yeah, we see a lot of opportunity. When I go to the park, sometimes we hike for 2 weeks in the bush, just us and the rangers, and it feels safe. We don't see those type of challenges in those areas.
No, that's fantastic. That's good to hear. I have a question from Francis Onaho, and it's a follow-up. It says it's a follow-up question to the one we got from Smart Atta. And the question is, what type of investment opportunities are open to, the not-for-profit organizations without prejudice to their humanitarian principles and their not-for-profit status, again, within the context of these dwindling funds?
So, for example, let me be specific about Annie, since this is what I know. We are just about to start an ecotourism project. We are about to get the final papers from the BP, Bureau for Public Enterprise. We are going to start first ecotourism, given our experience from Kenya and other places where we have sister projects. Now, which is why we call ourselves investors, because we also need to generate revenue to run. We cannot continuously depend on these donors who are going to get tired of us at any point in time. Since we are teaching the communities how to fish, we also need to know how to fish ourselves. We see ecotourism as a big opportunity to bring in revenue. Is it going to bring enough revenue to run the park 100%? We don't think so. Maybe not in our lifetime, maybe not in the short run. But there are other opportunities like carbon credit. We are currently trying to develop the first voluntary carbon project in Nigeria, where potentially a significant amount of our running cost to manage these parks and support these communities is going to come from all of that. So we have done a lot of the studies, a lot of the data collection using AI modeling and all of that. And we are now concluding the community engagement because from our perspective, if any money is going to come from carbon credit, there should be a benefit sharing formula where the communities are going to significantly also get some of these opportunities go to them directly and solve some of the problems that they have highlighted that these are their problems. What we see sometimes with many of these NGOs is they bring their interventions based on what they have decided to do from their headquarters. But for us, we build these interventions with the communities from the grassroots. We like to find out what they want, how they want, and how we can work together with them to achieve this. For example, we have partnership with the Leventis Foundation that runs some agri schools across the country that are fully funded. Through that collaboration, we were able to get some slots for some of the community members from around the park to be sent to the agri school in Abuja, where they are trained on modern agriculture, fishery, and poultry, and all of those things. So we are almost a small government in the community, but working closely with the government. So we work a lot more holistic, but we really look at what other ways can we make money apart from writing proposals and begging donors? How can we raise money? Are we going to raise a lot of money? Should we support the communities to start weaving baskets, to start making pottery and lots of things that is going to bring money and reduce their dependence on what we are doing as an organization? So we look at it from that angle. So to answer his question, I would say it depends on what your philosophy is, what your area of discipline is, but it's really important in your vision to really think about financing. You may have a really good project doing a lot of wonderful work, but at the end of the day, if you have no money to fund the vision, then the vision is almost dead on arrival. Or depends on what a donor tells you.
So I want to talk a bit about the ecotourism idea, and I'll come to it. But can you explain to us how Annie sees community ownership? Yeah, because I've heard you mention that a few times. So when you start this ecotourism business, will the community own part of that business? And how are you thinking of their ownership in that business? And not just, oh, we're going to take money from that we make and build schools for you and do philanthropy. Are you thinking of them being part owners of the business that will come out of this resource that you're managing on their behalf?
Yes.
And if yes, what would that ownership look like?
Maybe one thing I should let you know, Patrick, I think sometimes it's been exaggerated how much money you can make from ecotourism, for example. To give you just an example, not specific figures, it may cost maybe $5 million to start a proper ecotourism business. You will probably never get that money in 12, 15 years. You will never even gain your capital back. So the ecotourism we are trying to start is going to be with some philanthropy, and we never expect to be able to kind of recoup all the money out. But at least we expect to be able to set up a system that will be generating revenue that would offset some of the running costs. For example, we have a few lodges now for staff and for guests that come to work for us there. All the people managing it, including some of our managers on our team, are people recruited from the local communities. All the people working there, whom we've sent to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Lagos, to Abuja to get trained. Some of them can barely read and write, but if they cook a three-course meal for you, you'll be shocked that this is coming from the village. So for us, which is why our philosophy is, if a donor brings $5 million to start an ecotourism project, that money may never come back from that ecotourism, but at least we have a project on ground that will be generating revenue that will allow us to employ more people, to give more scholarships, to continue to support the local security personnel in the area to do their job, and allow the project to continue to grow. I think there is this Nigerian factor of thinking if you start ecotourism is going to bring in a lot of profit, it may never be that profitable. And if you look at if you go to Rwanda, for example, Akagera National Park, last year they made over $4 million in their revenue, but that was still short of their running cost. So you would never make that type of profit that you would
Yeah,
think about, oh, is the community going to get 40% from the profit?
yeah,
It's never really going to bring that sort of profit. But
yeah.
it's good for you to be realistic from the onset, looking at projects from all over the continent. But is he going to be able to attract some some money that can be able to continue to run the project without running to a donor day and night? Yes. It's like you taking your life savings, maybe $1 million, and you build a school that you hope is going to fund your children's school fees in the next 20 years. Can a building in Nigeria, maybe in a state, be able to pay back $1 million in 30 years? No, it's not going to do it. Is it going to give you continuous revenue to at least keep the system running? Yes, it can. So for us, I think that is the angle that we are looking at it.
No,
But if
that's
at any point a project, the project brings in money that can go into the communities, we have the communities on the board, we have the communities carried along in everything. All of the all any excess money that is made that is not required for running the project is all going to be invested back into those communities.
fantastic, fantastic. When can the folks who are getting married today, when can they go to your national park for their honeymoon? And
Just
what are you going to say to them to convince them that it's safe to spend the weekend, spend the week in the national park? How do you intend to do that?
Just to rephrase your question, to their national park. Now, Nigerians must take ownership of the national park. It's not our national park. It's their national park. We are only holding it in trust for them. The EU ambassador to Nigeria was in the park with his wife, with me in May, and we camped on the mountains for 4 nights. So sometimes I find it very interesting when I just hosted someone from Netherlands in the park for several days. A guy from Netherlands doesn't think it's too dangerous, but the guy in Lagos think he cannot go there because it's too dangerous. So there is also the Nigerian perspective about safe and how safe and where it's safe. But also, I think Nigerians are disconnected a lot from nature. When Nigerian folks come around and say, "Oh, let's hike for 2 kilometers," no, 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 it's too dangerous. I will see insects, I will see a fly or a mosquito or a this. So I mean, for a newlywed that have the guts to go hiking, we can go hiking tomorrow because we you can use tents and you enjoy the park.
Mm.
But for high-end tourism, for newlywed that have the money to be able to afford to be flown in a helicopter from Lagos or from Abuja, I think in the next 12 to 18 months, you can be able to spend a lot of your time in Gashaka. But of course, it's high end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What animals would they see in Gashaka today?
Currently, the animals we see more often are buffaloes, roan antelopes, western hartebeest, different species of wild pigs, lots of birds. Sadly, elephants have gone extinct in Gashaka maybe about 20 years ago. Lions have gone extinct. Giraffes have gone extinct. But one of our medium-term goals is to be able to reintroduce those animals. I just returned from Cameroon 2 weeks ago. Those animals still exist in the border in Cameroon, and Nigeria and Cameroon just signed a transboundary agreement on collaboration on conservation. So there is the opportunity to bring those animals back. But we want to ensure that we've done enough work in the park to be able to reintroduce those animals so that tourists can come and experience and see what is happening. However, sometimes when you talk about tourism, one of the spectacular things about Gashaka, by the way, Gashaka has the highest point in Nigeria. It's the rolling mountains, it's the vegetation. If you go to Gashaka this season, it feels like you're in Switzerland. So it it's also important for tourists to understand what is obtainable, what is available, and be able to manage their expectation. Since we've started, we've seen a serious rebound in the wildlife population, and I believe in the next 3 to 5 years there will be wildlife all over the place. But Gashaka, it's very mountainous. It's not your normal savanna like Yankari where you just walk around. Some of it needs a lot of hard trekking if you want to trek it out. The ecotourism options that will be provided would include, if you are strong enough and a hardcore, you can go on 2 weeks trek. Or if you just want it easy and light and you have the pocket or the budget to afford it, you can be flown all around with a helicopter, all bills inclusive.
No, that's music to my ears, and I really love what I'm hearing, and I must commend you and the organization for what you're doing. Um, but how do you measure impact, and how do you communicate that impact to your donors so it continues to resonate with them? And this is a question that really bothers many people working in the development space. So can you share with us, how you think about impact, some of the measures you use, and how the investors respond to those measures?
Yes. So to us, the ultimate measure of impact is we have a society that is thriving, that is doing so well, whose economy has changed because you have a park that is safe, a park that is thriving. supporting all of these things to happen in the communities. But in the short term, we all ranger patrols collect data in real time. All people coming working in the communities, they collect data. At the end of every month, we have a very robust dashboard electronically that displays how many patrols were made, what is the patrol effort, how many arrests, wildlife sightings, what species of wildlife, where you have poaching incidences. So some of those KPIs help to inform our local team to know where there is more or less pressure and how do we do it. But also for me, at the end of the month, we are able to look at how many women have we supported, how many school visits have we achieved, how many boreholes have we supported. So for us, impact it's all inclusive and it depends on which donor you are talking about. We have donors that are only interested in water, sanitation, and hygiene, and that is what they fund. So for those donors, we measure the impact by what we have achieved in that field, and that is how we respond to that. But ultimately, how does the community record impact? When we had the recent town hall meeting with the communities, if you ask them, what are they most happy about? To them, they say is they can go to their farms freely, they can go to the market freely and do their things, which was not the case years ago. Some of the women tell us they now have purchasing power. Before this project, the women had nothing of their own, but they now employment work for them. They now pay school fees, and the men are now happy because some of the bills at home are subsidized. This was a dream before the project started, but now it's a reality. So for us, this is how we are recording impact. But also the wildlife sightings, for example, when we started, nobody could ever see a buffalo. We thought buffaloes were extinct, but now we see buffalo. 3 years after we started, with the aid of technology and the camera traps we've put in the bush, we have sighted animals that we were told were extinct 20 years ago. For example, the leopard. We didn't know we have lots of leopard in the park, but now we are seeing leopard. For us, that is success. But also the acceptance by the government and the donor. When we see the revenues that are coming in from donors, for us, that is as a result of the impact. Last month, we launched a solar project, an off-grid solar project in 63 households in one of the communities. For us, that is real impact. These communities are getting electricity for the first time since they were created. For us, that is real impact. So for us, measuring impact is an all-inclusive thing. When we started, the state government was skeptical, but we have now signed an MOU to work with the state government to support them with some of their protected areas in the state. So for us, this is also measuring impact. But also when we get invitation like from Nextier to say we heard you are doing a lot of good things, we feel this is measuring impact because someone has seen what we are doing and they think it's something that somebody should talk about. So impact to us, it's all holistic. It's not just how much money we are making or how much we are spending, but we are accountable to the federal government, but also most importantly to all of us, it's the communities who we are holding this asset for them in trust. Because I always tell them, this is your national park. We are only working for you as laborers. We must join hands to make this thing work.
Fantastic. And as we come to the end of this chat, I have a few very specific questions for you. If you were approached by a state government, that's looking to preserve a national park within their state, or that, a bunch of states that come together and they want to preserve, a park that they share commonly, what are the top 3, top 5 things that they must do to ensure that they can successfully run the parks?
I think I would say your question differently. First of all, I would tell them they cannot run the parks. They need a partner that understands how to run the parks and be able to work with them and allow them to run the park. From my experience working with state governments, I haven't seen anyone that has run any park in Nigeria, with all due respect to them. So the first thing I would tell them is, yes, you cannot do it, but you need to have the guts to be able to find the right partner that has not come here to do mining, that has not come here to do logging, that will run a transparent project and have you included. But you have to give them a long-term trust and allow them and work with them, create the enabling environment and allow them to do it. I don't think continuously the state government has demonstrated that they cannot do it. There is no state government in the 36 states, except maybe one of the new ones that is about to be formed, that has run that has run any successful protected area that you would say this is a model that you would want to copy. I haven't seen any in Nigeria.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I would encourage them not to do it, but to provide the enabling environment and allow the partners who can do it to make it happen. When you look at countries like Kenya, South Africa, and all of these, the reason they are successful is they have opened up and have allowed partners like us to come in. And I must commend the Nigerian federal government because it's the first time they have signed the type of agreement they did with us. And this is because they trusted us, and we don't take that trust for granted. And we have continued to travel this journey with them. And yeah, we think a brighter future.
And by the way, as you commend the federal government, I want to commend the founders of ANI for the vision and for staying strong with the vision they've set out for themselves. And knowing what one of the co-founders is doing in the art space, with MOA
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Benin, it's just fascinating. We're still trying to get him on this show, and hopefully we can
yeah.
find him soon to talk about all the stuff he's doing. But really, if you can sum up for us, NGOs facing decline in aid, in your view, what are the top three things they can do to, one, ride this storm, but again, ensure that they're never in this position again?
I mean, having traveled the Northeast a lot, one of the things I would say there are too many NGOs in Nigeria. Some of them are not even prepared to be formed in the first place. That I see is a problem, which is why they are very vulnerable to any shock. Because some of them, probably 10 or 15 of them, could have formed one NGO to survive and be stronger and be able to navigate the waters a bit more. I would say people shouldn't just wake up from sleep and form NGOs. Do a lot of homework before you set up the NGO. You know it's Nigeria, you know the Nigerian factor, you know the challenges of working in Nigeria. So do enough homework and make sure that you are out to succeed, you are out to win. But also, really importantly, don't just sit down and depend that you will continue to get philanthropy. Think of yourself, you may be not for profit, but you could be generating revenue that can cover your minimum running cost. I don't know what those revenue is. I don't know what you are really going to do, but it's really nice for you to think about that long term because yeah, sometimes things can change. Even after you've signed agreement with donors, sometimes they can change their mind and things would flow. And even from experience, I've had donors that are willing to give you the money, but there are strings attached that doesn't align with your philosophy. So you have to let those money go. And if you don't have any source of money, and that's the only thing you have to do, you realize some organizations will slowly change their philosophy to align with the philosophy of the source of funding that they are getting, which is not ideal.
Any last thoughts? Maybe something we haven't covered that you really want to talk about?
No, not really. I think we have covered a lot. And yeah, I look forward to meeting more people from the NGO space. I kind of feel the government needs to do a lot to create enabling environment for the NGOs to thrive. The NGO has created a lot of jobs, good jobs for Nigerians, and have solved a lot of problems. And there is opportunity to do more. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the government to create the right policies through the tax, through any other means that they can create so that things can work. The government cannot employ everyone. And even when they do, people are not gainfully employed. People are employed and they have five side hustles they are doing and they are master of none. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in Nigeria, but yeah, there is a lot more for the government to do to support what we are doing. They have started. We have a fantastic relationship with the government. Could it be better? Yes. Can they listen more? Yes. But we think they can open up more and create the opportunity. And all of these jobs that have been lost from the cut in US government funding is directly affecting the Nigerian economy. So I hope the government is going to see the NGO space as a quite important sector that they need to be very deliberate about so that we can together navigate the waters of this country.
Exactly, exactly. And Nacha, thank you so much for making time to join us today, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for today's episode of Development Discuss. Big ideas, important questions, real conversations. Until next time, it's Patrick Okigbo. Let's keep building that society we want to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.